This case gained national and worldwide attention, causing public revolt and uproar during a Christmas period that should have been for celebration. This man not only took the life of a young girl, but he hid the body in his lorry outside of his house, all while he sat inside, slicing turkey and celebrating Christmas with his family. This is the case of Celine Figard. Celine Figard was born on the 23rd of May 1976 in France to her mother Martine and her father Bernard Figard. She had two brothers, Stéphane and Nicolas, and a sister, Corinne. Celine was now 19 years of age. She wanted to become an accountant and was studying hard. The family lived in a rural eastern part of France, and she hoped to work abroad. She had developed a fondness for the United Kingdom following a 1990 holiday in the country. Since then, she had saved up and travelled there repeatedly, whenever she could, and generally during the school or college holidays when she was not studying. Celine had spent the whole summer of 1995 working at a hotel in Fordingbridge, Hampshire. It was a hotel where her cousin, Jean-Marc, had started working. His job was head waiter, and he'd been there for the past couple of months, so she had asked him previously if there had been any jobs going, and she felt she could work there, earn money. She knew her uncle, and she could improve her English, which was very important to her. After speaking to her uncle, Celine had heard news that there was a job going, so she had already been once and she had worked there with her uncle. She had planned to go again in December. So Celine left her home on Monday the 18th of December in France. She travelled to the French coast with a family friend. He was a lorry driver. He was employed by a local haulage firm. This was arranged by her parents, so they knew him. So Celine travelled across the English Channel the following day with this guy arriving in Ashford, Kent. Celine had planned to travel by train from Fordingbridge. Another French lorry driver, Roger Bouvier, had been asked by a relative to give her a lift when she arrived to the UK, so it was arranged that he was willing to take her to Newbury in Berkshire. When the pair arrived by lorry where she needed to go, they had something to eat before Celine called her uncle, Jean-Marc, to tell him to pick her up. But unbeknown to Celine at the time, she had misdialed his number, meaning that the phone just rang out. Not knowing what to do next and wondering why her uncle was not picking up, Celine decided to ask people for a lift. Subsequently, Celine was offered a lift to Salisbury by a driver of a large white Mercedes lorry. Her French friend, Mr. Bouvier, had reservations about the whole situation, including the driver, but in the end, after expressing to Celine his concerns, he decided to let her go nonetheless. Celine left the service station with this guy, who was an unknown driver to them, at 4:30 p.m. She waved as the white Mercedes left the park. But Celine never arrived at her destination and was reported missing the following day. Unknown to everyone that within hours of climbing into this burly tattooed monster's cab, Celine had lost her life. This Mercedes lorry driver had pulled off the road away from sight. The man had bound Celine's petite hands behind her back and continued to RAPE her on the bunk of his lorry before battering her over the head and forcibly restricting her throat. Then this man coolly drove around the country for about 10 days before driving his lorry home and spending Christmas at home with his 47-year-old wife and 11-year-old son. The white Mercedes lorry with Celine's body hidden behind the driving seat was parked outside his house, all while he celebrated Christmas, all while police appealed for information about her disappearance. They distributed photos of her to service stations and lorry drivers. They questioned lorry drivers And when the family friend came forward to say that she had received a lift from this guy in a white Mercedes lorry, police took it seriously and looked at CCTV in and around the service areas. They tried to track this lorry down and gain a registration for it and track its whereabouts now. This driver needed to be spoken to. Police issued a photo fit of this lorry driver, hoping that somebody would recognise him. It was Christmas. A lot of companies had closed until the new year and families were at home together. So police used this opportunity by expressing their concerns on news channels and in newspapers. They documented Celine's case, telling the public to be on the lookout for her, asking anyone if they'd seen or spoken to her around this time. They even released a photo fit on the news channel of this man that they wanted to speak to. By the 25th of December, investigators were working on the theory that this lorry driver had abducted Celine, and the following day, detectives investigating the case said that they were now working on the assumption that Celine had been murdered. Celine's father travelled to the UK to help detectives in their search for her and to appeal to the public on news channels for information about her whereabouts. But then, despite the police's exhaustive investigations, many of them not even seeing Christmas and their families themselves, on the morning of Friday, the 29th of December, a naked body of a young woman was found dumped at a lay-by on the A449 near Worcestershire village of Hawford. A motorist had stopped in the lay-by in order to change a windscreen wiper. They'd found this young girl's body. Police sought to establish the young girl's identity. At first, they thought it might be missing Louise Smith, an 18-year-old clerical assistant who'd vanished early on Christmas morning, but this young woman was not Louise Smith. Her body was discovered in 1996. This body had been sent for a full examination, and after a couple of days, they were able to positively identify it as Celine Figard, the French girl that had only come to work in the hotel to earn a bit of money and help with her English. The post-mortem determined that Celine had compression to the neck, that she'd been bludgeoned with a heavy implement around her head, but did not establish which of the injuries had taken her life. The post-mortem also revealed there were no obvious signs of SA, but determined that SEX had taken place shortly before her death, and detectives believed it had occurred against her will. Police said that the body had been lying there where it had been found for at least 24 hours and were working on the theory that she'd been held in captive before her life had been taken. Detective Chief Superintendent Roger Hadinot of the Hampshire Police said that at the time of her discovery, they feel that her body had laid there for at least 4 to 5 days, but did not announce the time of death. The investigation was led by DCS John McMonott of the West Mercia Police and involved more than 100 detectives from 3 separate forces. Officers examined similar unsolved murders amid concerns they may have all been the work of the same individual. The DCS ruled out a link at a press conference on the 4th of January. I would stress that at this stage there is no evidence whatsoever to link Celine's murder with any other of our investigations. On the 12th of January 1996, investigators announced that they would perform DNA testing on drivers of all similar vehicles to the white Mercedes. This was the first time that this method was used nationally to identify a suspect. Detectives traced more than 1,000 vehicles and tested 5,000 drivers. On the 19th of February, West Mercia Police confirmed that they had a man in custody, and he was helping them with their inquiries. The following day, authorities announced that this suspect was English and had been arrested in Poole in Dorset. In a joint operation between West Mercia and Dorset Police, he was subsequently identified to the public as Stuart Morgan. Stuart was a 36-year-old self-employed lorry driver who, on the 21st of February, was remanded following an appearance at Redditch Magistrates Court on charges of murder. Stuart William Morgan was one of 5 children to John and Julianne Morgan. He was raised in Tunbridge Wells in Kent, where his father was a council foreman and his mother a refugee from former East Germany. She worked as a school cleaner. Stuart had left school with 3 GCSEs and in 1974 served a custodial sentence in Borstal Prison following a conviction for breaking into a house and taking something that wasn't his. After attending Croydon Polytechnic College to train as a plumber and heating engineer, he tried to start his own business, a plumbing business in Tunbridge Wells. He moved to Dorset following the failure of his business in 1983 and worked as a heating engineer for the Bournemouth County Council. But he got bored of that and decided he wanted to become a lorry driver. In 1991, Stuart was driving from Leeds to Southampton when he picked up Celine on the 19th of December 1995. Now, detectives concluded that after forcing himself on her and taking her life, Stuart left her body in the bottom bunk of his cab for up to 10 days while he continued to drive the lorry, driving and sleeping in it for at least some of that time before going home for Christmas and then disposing of her body on the 29th of December. He was arrested in February 1996 after another lorry driver recognised him from the photo fit that had been made, and Stuart initially denied meeting Celine. But after he was picked out of an identity parade by this other lorry driver, Stuart claimed that he and Celine had met. They had met in a car park where the lorries parked and apparently had engaged in consensual sex. Now, the trial began at Worcester Crown Court on the 2nd of October 1996 before Mr. Justice Latham and a jury. Stuart Morgan's trial counsel was Nigel Jones QC, and the case was prosecuted by David Farrer QC. Stuart Morgan denied the charge of murder. Evidence was presented by the prosecution to suggest that Stuart continued to use the vehicle while Celine's body lay in the cab and that the lorry was parked outside his house over the Christmas period. David Farrer QC spoke to Stuart Morgan and brought to his attention the spade, axe and hacksaw that he had in his possession, with the possible intention of dismembering Celine's body, but changed his mind, instead making an overnight delivery run to dispose of it. After removing a fuse from his lorry's tachograph, in order to conceal his journey, he drove to Worcestershire. Discrepancies were subsequently found in his travel records for the 29th of December 1995 because he forgot to replace the fuse following the trip. Now, several items belonging to Celine, including photographs and a toilet bag, were recovered from his home address. Stuart Morgan admitted giving Celine a lift on the afternoon of the 19th of December and that she was smiling and happy. He did not come forward after police appealed for details of the driver who had given her a lift because he did not want his wife to know about his infidelity. He claimed her photographs and the toilet bag items were in his possession because she had left them in his truck, and the mattress had become stained with blood because a man had laid on it after gashing his leg while the vehicle was on loan to another driver in 1994. Now, on the 16th of October, a jury took 3.5 hours to decide to convict Stuart Morgan of Celine's murder. He was sentenced to life in prison with a recommendation that the Home Secretary should decide his parole eligibility. Passing sentence, Mr. Justice Latham said, "What you did to Celine has caused revulsion in the minds of all right-thinking people. You are a dangerous man, and I will so report to the Home Secretary." Latham subsequently set a minimum term of 20 years, which was later endorsed by the Lord Chief Justice of England and Wales, Lord Bingham. On the 4th of November 1988, the Home Secretary Jack Straw informed Stuart Morgan of the length of his sentence that he must serve. Stuart Morgan appealed his conviction on the grounds that it was unfair due to the level of publicity that the case received. His application was rejected by the Court of Appeal of England and Wales on the 5th of February 1998, after the 3 sitting judges ruled that there was insufficient grounds to justify an appeal. The sentence is, and still remains, a sentence of life imprisonment. The defendant may not even be considered for release until he has served at least 20 years, less the time served before the sentence. That is not to say that he will not be released. Indeed, he will be detained unless and until the parole board is satisfied that he no longer presents a risk to the public. Even if the parole board decides, or sometime in the future, to authorise his release, he will be upon licence, which will extend for the rest of his life. A hearing at the High Court on the 26th of January was told that under the terms of his sentence, Stuart Morgan would be eligible for parole in February, but had continued to maintain his innocence throughout his time in prison, claiming it to be a catch-22 situation, that he could not qualify for release without admitting guilt. Rejecting Morgan's case, Justice William Davis suggested that Stuart Morgan had not addressed his offending behaviour and was in effect the same position as he was back in December 1995. Of course, Celine's parents remain in France. They now have 3 children rather than 4. It's been an absolutely terrible time, a time that they have had to travel back and forwards for court cases, but at least there was some justice. Unfortunately, it will not mend the hearts for the Figard family.